Right, you're locked in for a deep dive into a footballing relationship that's, well, it's packed with history, isn't it? And quite a few twists, all leading up to this Europa League final. Manchester United versus Tottenham Hotspur, May 22nd. It's going to be a late one, 2 a.m.
It really is. And we're talking, what, 126 years of history between these two?
Yeah.
That's a massive amount of time, generations of players and fans involved. Major English clubs, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny, when you think Spurs rivalries, you immediately go to Arsenal, right? North London derby or Chelsea. Real proper firecrackers, those games.
Definitely. Or even, the more recent stuff with Man City has had a real edge to it.
But United, it just feels a bit different, doesn't it? There's, I don't know, maybe more respect there, less of that raw, visceral dislike you get in the London derbies. Why do you reckon that is?
Well, I think a big part of it is that they haven't consistently been fighting each other for the biggest prizes, year in, year out. Tottenham have had great teams, great periods, absolutely. But they haven't really challenged United for league titles repeatedly in the same way Liverpool or Arsenal did back in the day. It's that constant direct competition at the very top that really brews the fiercest rivalries, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. With United and Spurs, it's been more, well, a bit up and down. Different periods where one clearly had the upper hand.
Exactly. Fluctuating power dynamic is a good way to put it.
Okay, so that's kind of our mission today, isn't it? To really get into this relationship, go beyond just the final itself, and look at the key historical moments, the way the power has shifted, and maybe some of those fascinating what-ifs.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got plenty of stats and stories to dig into. It paints a pretty rich picture.
Cool. So where do we start? Right at the beginning.
Let's do it. Go all the way back, January 1899. United were still Newton Heath then, of course.
Right.
And they faced Tottenham in the FA Cup. First game, January 28th, finished 1-1. So a replay needed. That was just a few days later, February 1st. And Tottenham won it, quite convincingly, actually, 5-3. So, an early marker put down by Spurs, maybe a sign of things to come. Or maybe not, as history kind of showed.
Yeah. Funny how those early results can sometimes be a bit misleading. Because if you look at the big picture, the overall head-to-head,
yeah,
well, it leans pretty heavily one way, doesn't it?
Oh, massively. Across, 204 matches? United have 95 wins, Tottenham 57 and 51 draws. That's a significant gap.
It really is. What do you think drove that sustained dominance from United over such a long stretch?
Well, you can't look past those huge periods of success, can you? Under Sir Matt Busby, and then especially under Sir Alex Ferguson. Those golden eras,
right?
They just build this incredible winning machine, the mentality, attracting the absolute top players. It just created a gap, didn't it, in quality and consistency compared to most other clubs, and that included Tottenham for large parts of that history.
Yeah, the resources, the winning culture, it all fed into it. And the sources we looked at actually use this term muckham, which translates roughly to an inferiority complex, almost that Tottenham maybe felt towards United historically.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about the trophies on the pitch, but even players. We saw some massive Tottenham stars make that move north to Old Trafford.
Yeah, that's a key part of the story. Teddy Sheringham, Michael Carrick, Dimitar Berbatov. Huge players for Spurs who ended up at United.
Why do you think those specific moves happened? What was the impact?
Well, often it coincided with United being right at their peak, didn't it? So they could offer, not just bigger wages probably, but a much better chance of winning the Premier League, the Champions League, that global stage.
The sheer pull of United back then.
Exactly. For players wanting to win the biggest trophies, United was often the ultimate destination. And the impact, well, it was double-edged, wasn't it? United got stronger, adding proven quality. And Tottenham, well, they lost key assets and often had to kind of rebuild to readjust, which maybe just reinforced that feeling you mentioned, that mock.
And it's interesting, there's a little detail mentioned about Carrick and Berbatov, that they apparently wanted to leave Spurs, but were, really apprehensive about the negotiations with Daniel Levy.
Yeah, Levy's reputation as a tough negotiator is legendary, isn't it? Especially, perhaps, with London rivals.
Right. But this suggests maybe there was a different dynamic when United came knocking. What does that tell us about the power balance back then?
It really highlights it, doesn't it? Clear imbalance. Tottenham, big club, absolutely. But maybe seen as less able to dig their heels in against Manchester United compared to how they might deal with, say, Arsenal or Chelsea. There was perhaps this understanding, maybe even a sort of acceptance, that if United really wanted one of their stars, it was going to be incredibly difficult to stop it happening. For the player and ultimately for the club, too.
Which leads us neatly onto that infamous phrase, lads, it's Tottenham. Supposedly something you'd hear in the United dressing room.
Yeah, that's the one. Brutal, really.
It paints this picture of United viewing Spurs as, well, maybe mentally brittle, a bit easier to break down. Roy Keane's comments about wanting to break them kind of feed into that narrative, too.
Absolutely. That psychological edge, or at least the belief that they had that edge. And look, we've seen it play out on the pitch in some pretty famous ways.
Oh, yeah. Those comebacks.
Legendary, aren't they? The first one that always springs to mind is 2001, White Hart Lane. Spurs were 3-0 up at halftime, flying. Gus Poyet was brilliant.
I remember that it looked completely over. What on earth happened in that second half? Must have been some hairdryer treatment.
You'd imagine so. Sir Alex Ferguson wasn't known for quiet halftime talks when things were going wrong. But beyond that, it just felt like a switch flicked. United came out with this unbelievable intensity.
And Spurs just couldn't live with it.
Not at all. Cole scored, blank, Van Nistelrooy, Varane, even Beckham got one. 5 unanswered goals in the second half. 5-3. It was just relentless. Tottenham seemed to just crumble under the pressure.
Incredible turnaround. And then it happened again, didn't it? 2009, Old Trafford this time.
Yep. Similar pattern. Spurs go 2-0 up. Bent and Madrid scored. They looked comfortable.
And you're thinking, okay, maybe they've learned.
You think, but no. United roar back again. Rooney. Ronaldo got a couple, I think. And Berbatov scored against his old club, rubbing salt in the wounds. Finished 5-2.
Wow. It's that recurring theme, isn't it? Spurs get ahead against United, look good, and then poof. That does suggest a bit of a psychological block back then, doesn't it?
It really does. A fragility, maybe, specifically in those pressure moments against United.
Now let's pivot slightly, because there's a huge what-if moment in this whole story that could have changed absolutely everything for both clubs.
You're talking about Sir Alex Ferguson.
Exactly. Tottenham trying to hire him back in 1984. It's an amazing bit of history.
It really is.
Yeah.
Keith Birkinshaw had just left Spurs, right?
Yeah.
Despite winning trophies, UEFA Cup, couple FA Cups.
Yeah, successful period. But he left, and the chairman, Irving Scholar, was looking for someone ambitious, and his eyes landed on Ferguson up at Aberdeen.
And you can see why. Ferguson was doing unbelievable things with Aberdeen. Breaking the Rangers' Celtic dominance in Scotland, winning league titles, cups.
And winning in Europe, that Winners' Cup victory against Real Madrid, that was huge.
Absolutely massive. It put him firmly on the map as one of the brightest managers around. He was seen as, the future, a winner, a disciplinarian, someone who could build something special.
And Scholar really went for it. He talks about serious talks, flying to Paris.
Yeah.
Apparently, they even shook hands on a deal.
Yeah, the handshake agreement. Scholar apparently took that very seriously, saw it as a done deal, a matter of honor almost.
So the disappointment must have been immense when Ferguson decided not to join Tottenham. He stayed at Aberdeen for a bit longer, won more trophies.
Yeah, another league title. A cup double, I think, before eventually heading to Manchester United in '86. And the rest, as they say, is history. 27 legendary years at Old Trafford.
It's just one of football's great sliding doors moments, isn't it? How different could things have been if Ferguson had ended up at White Hart Lane instead of Old Trafford?
Almost impossible to properly imagine, is it? You'd have to think a manager of his caliber, his steel, his ambition.
Yeah.
He would have made a massive difference at Tottenham.
Definitely.
Whether he could have built the same kind of dynasty without perhaps the scale of resources United offered later, who knows? But for Spurs, it feels like a monumental missed opportunity. And for United, maybe a huge slice of luck that he didn't go there first.
Totally agree. Okay, let's fast forward a bit now into the more modern era, say post-2000, because while United still had plenty of success in those head-to-heads, we did start seeing Tottenham get some big results too. What do the more recent games tell us?
Well, the early 2000s were still pretty dominated by United. I remember that 4-0 win in 2002. Beckham was just unplayable that day.
Right.
And even the 2009 League Cup final. It went to penalties after 0-0, and United won it, even though they played quite a few reserves, I think. Spurs missed their chance there. Mudryk and Pavlyuchenko were key for them then.
Yeah, another near miss for Spurs. But then things did start to shift a little, didn't they? September 2012 sticks in my mind.
The Old Trafford win. Finally, first time in, 23 years they'd won there? 3-2. Gareth Bale was absolutely electric that day.
That felt huge. A real barrier broken down. And they actually won there again the season after, didn't they? January 2014, 2-1. Even after Bale had left, Lloris was amazing in goal.
They did. 2 wins in a row at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
That definitely suggested something was changing. A growing confidence, maybe.
Yeah.
A belief they could actually go there and get a result. consistently.
But even then, there were still those moments, weren't there? Like the 2018 FA Cup semifinal. Spurs score first through Dele Alli, look good.
And then United come back and win it. Again, just when a trophy looked within reach for Tottenham, they stumble against United at a crucial stage. It felt like that old psychological hurdle hadn't completely disappeared.
It lingered, didn't it? But then, October 2020, that has to be mentioned.
The 6-1 at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
That was astonishing. One of United's absolute worst home defeats ever in the Premier League.
Son and Kane just ran riot, didn't they? Doubles for both. Martial got sent off United early on, but still, 6-1. Did that feel like a definitive turning point, a real power shift?
It certainly felt like a massive statement from Spurs. Proof they could not just compete, but utterly dismantle United on their own patch. A huge psychological blow delivered by Tottenham for a change.
But the football's never straightforward, is it? Because just a couple of seasons later, March 2022, back at Old Trafford,
Cristiano Ronaldo happens. Hat trick. United win 3-2 in a really tight game, crucial for the top 4 race.
Right. So it shows that even after the 6-1, United still had that quality, that ability to hit back in these specific encounters. The dynamic might be evolving, but maybe not completely flipped.
Exactly. It's become much more competitive, much less predictable than it was for long periods, but United still possess that threat.
Okay, so let's try and pull all this together then. We've got over a century of games, United's historical dominance clear in the stats, these psychological narratives, the MU-Tottenham, the lads, it's Tottenham stuff.
The huge what if of Sir Alex Ferguson.
And then these more recent results, which are much more mixed, including some big Spurs wins. How do you see all that feeding into the dynamic now, heading into this massive Europa League final?
It makes it absolutely fascinating, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You can't ignore the weight of history, that historical superiority United enjoyed for so long. And you have to think that psychological element, even subconsciously, has played a part over the years. But at the same time, Tottenham have shown, especially recently, they can beat United. They can score goals against them, even trash them. So the big question is, can they carry that belief, that capability onto the stage of a major final against this specific opponent?
Yeah, that's the crux of it. Do you think that historical inferiority complex, that MU still exists for this current group of Spurs players? Or have those recent wins, like the 6-1, maybe helped exercise some of those demons?
It's so hard to know for sure what's going on inside players' heads, isn't it? I mean, maybe subconsciously, there's still that feeling of needing to overcome this historical giant.
Could be.
But on the other hand, those recent victories, especially the big ones, must give them confidence. They know they can do it. They have tangible proof. So I think it comes down to mental strength on the night for both sides, actually.
And thinking about the final itself, without making any predictions, obviously, how might this history actually influence the game? Could we see those old patterns resurface? Maybe Spurs getting nervy if they take the lead, or United finding a way back? Or is this Tottenham team different?
It really could go either way, couldn't it? You could argue United feel the pressure of that history, the expectation that they should win based on the past. That can be a burden too.
True.
And for Tottenham, it's this huge opportunity, a chance to win a major European trophy, and to do it against the team that's often been this roadblock for them. They'll be absolutely desperate to grab that chance to prove they've broken that mold.
So those first 15, 20 minutes could be crucial, setting the psychological tone.
Absolutely vital. You get a sense early on, I think, of how both teams are handling the occasion and that historical context.
And just one last little thought on that Ferguson what if. It's still just mind-boggling to think how different English football might look today if he'd gone to Spurs in '84.
It really is. Proper sliding doors moment.
Yeah.
One of the biggest what ifs in the game, for sure.
So to wrap up our deep dive then, we've covered a lot of ground. Over 100 years of Manchester United versus Tottenham, United's long periods of dominance, the stats backing that up.
The psychological angles, the player transfers, that huge near miss with Sir Alex Ferguson.
And the more back and forth nature of the recent meetings. It's been a really complex and evolving relationship.
Definitely. And like we said, however much history gives us context, and it gives us a lot, a final is a one-off. It's about what happens on that specific night.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you listening. Considering everything we've unpacked today, the history, the psychology, the key moments, the players, what single factor do you think will be the most decisive one in this Europa League final between United and Tottenham? Is it going to be that historical weight? Is it current form? A tactical masterclass? Or just a moment of individual brilliance? Something to ponder ahead of the game?